Daf Peches Amud Aleph, 7 lines from the top. V'amar Rabbi Elazar, my dachsi v'halchu amim rabim v'amr l'chu v'nale el har Hashem el beis Elokei Yaakov. The nations will come and say, let's go to the mountain of Hashem, to the house of the Hashem of Yaakov. So why does it specify Yaakov, Elokei Yaakov, v'lo Elokei Avram v'Yitzchak? Why does it specify Dafke Yaakov? Elo like Avram shekos v'har. Meaning, though, that means to say, not like Avram Avinu who called it a mountain, Shenemar Asher Yemar Hayoim Bahar Hashem Yeron. So he said in reference to the Beis HaMikdash, he said that he called it a mountain. V'loiki Yitzchak shekasa b'Sodeh. Not like Yitzchak said, Sodeh Shenemar V'yetze Yitzchak lasuach b'Sodeh. Yitzchak went to daven in the Sodeh. Ella Keyakov shekaru bayis. Like Yaakov Avinu, who called it a bayis, Shenemar, Vayikra, and Shema Malkamahu, Beisel. He called that place, he called it bayis, Beisel. Meaning that the way the Mashal explains it is that Los Lovai, it will be the bayis shlishi. The bayis shlishi will have permanence. The first two were destroyed; they weren't permanent. So to say like it's a mountain, a field, those are not permanent places to daven. But a house already, that refers to something that denotes something that has permanence, like the bayis shlishi, which will not be destroyed, which will be permanent. He said that the day of Kibbutz Goliath, where they gather all the people who were in Goliath, to gather them together, it is great as the creation of Shemayim V'Aretz. Shenemar v'nikbetzu b'nei Yehuda v'nei Yisrael yachtav v'samal hem roish echad v'olam min haaretz ki gadol Yom Yisrael. So it says, it refers to the day of Kibbutz Goliath. It says that nikbetzu, they'll gather together b'nei Yehuda v'nei Yisrael. And it said that they'll come to the Eretz Yisrael, ki godol yom. It refers to it as a yom. Oksi vayi'er vayivaker yom echad. So it connects it to the other place where it says yom, the first yom in the Torah, vayi'er vayivaker yom echad, and that it shows it's connected. It is great like the day of the creation of Shemayim V'Aretz. Coming back to the Lachs in the Mishnah says Yosem Sheshach Apitrops, and if there was a Yosem, an orphan, that the administrators, Apitrops, shechted the Korban Pesach, so there's more than one Korban Pesach that's shechted on his behalf, he can choose whichever one he wants. So Shama Mino, Yesh Breira, so let's learn out from here that Yesh Breira, because since the Korban Pesach and has to be registered, you have to be nimna on it, you have to nimna on it by the time of Shchita, he chooses after the fact. How can choosing after the fact, how can that help for the time of the Shchita? Must be that Yesh Breira. Amar Rav Zera said, no, it's not a raya, because the Torah says, Sel Labayis, Mikol Malka, that it's a set for a house, and which means Mikol Malka, that the head of the household, he can designate the Korban Pesach, he can designate, even against their will, even without their decision on it, he can dictate and say that this set should be for the bias. So therefore, the head of the household, and in this case, the apitropis, the guardian, he can register the Korban Pesach for the cotton, and you don't need the cotton's consent, so therefore it's not negeya to Breira. Breira is not relevant here. Tan Rabbanan, we see a right that is, the Brisa says, Labayis, a lamb for a household, Melamich Adam maybe Meshechet, he can bring a Korban Pesach and shechted, Al Yudei B'nai Avita Ketanim, for the benefit of his children who are Ketanim, Al Yudei Avda V'Shivchosa Ketanim, and for an Eved Shivcha who are Kenanim. Bein Midaitam, Bein Shalem Midaitam, with or without their consent. If they're minors, then he can do it for them. If they're Ketanim, you don't need their consent. If they're Avda Shivcha Ketanim, which are dependent on him, totally dependent on him, you don't need their consent. So for Ketanim, they're dependent on the father. And over and above the financial dependency, there's also a mitzvah chinuch. So therefore, he is the one who is in charge, who's responsible, and he makes the decision. However, but in these cases, where they're independent. And even in a wife, where she can say to her husband, financially, she can declare her independence. And the children who gedolim and Eved of Shilcha, who are Ivrim, who can redeem themselves, there, it's elamidaitim, you need their consent. Tanya Yidach was learned in another brayso, lo yishchot adam loy al yedei b'nai evita gedolim. He can't shech the korban pesach for his children who are gedolim, v'loy al yedei avdav shivchosa ivrim, and not for his slaves who are ivrim, v'al yedei ishta, and not for his wife. Elamidaitim, only if they give their consent. Aval sheichet al yedei b'nai evita ketanim, al yedei avdav shivchosa ketanim, ben midaitim ben shalom midaitim. But the Kol Sheshachta, it says in all of these cases, where the Shechter on Pesach, the Shachad Rabban Aleim, and the Rabbi also, the master also Shechted Korban Pesach for them. So which one are the Yaitza with? Yaitzim Bishal Rabban. They're Yaitza with their Rabban and Yaitzim Bishal Asman, not their own. Chutz min Isha, except for the case of the Isha, she because she can protest and she can opt out and she can bring her own Korban Pesach. What's different about the Isha? Why is that different than the children who are Gedolim and the Avanim who are Ivrim? Amar Rava and Chanami, there is no difference. It means Isha and anyone who is similar to him that can declare their independence in that manner, financial independence, and therefore they can be their Yoitza with their own one. So, it seems to be a stira. That an Isha, she can be Meicha. She can protest, she can opt out, and therefore she can bring her own Korban Pesach. So, time of the Mochi, that implies only if she protests. But if she doesn't formally protest, then she's Yoitza with her husband. The Reisha says that you need her consent. That meaning she doesn't have to protest, which implies that unless you get her consent, then you can't shechter for the wife. You need her consent, meaning she doesn't have to protest. If she does nothing, then she's not included. She has to consent to include. So astam alei nafka, which implies that minastam, she doesn't specify, she's not yaitza with her husband. When it says no, my elamidaitan, what it means, midaitan, love the amri in, it doesn't mean that she has to say yes. Midaitan doesn't mean that she has to actively say yes. Al-bastama, it means minastam. Minastam, that's deemed to be consent. What it means to exclude is where she says no, where she protests, where she makes a machaw, where she says no. But otherwise, you don't need her to say yes. Minastam, we say she is deemed to consent. She consents without explicitly having to make a formal declaration. She is assumed to consent to the Korban Pesach of her husband. Break the Gemara of the Brisa says, Kulam sheshachta shachta Rama Leiman, all the cases where the Ketan, if they shechted and the master shechted for them, Yaitza B'Shel Rabban, they're Yaitza B'Shel Rabban. Now this is a case of stomach. There's nothing explicitly mentioned. Uktani chutz min hisham limchais, but it says the exception is the wife, that she's able to protest. Now, l'chayra, this is a case of stam. And apparently over here, we're saying that even if it's bestam, that the wife is not part of the chabur, since she has the ability to protest, meaning she's considered to be independent, she's not part of the chabur. Omarova, we don't know. This is not a case of stam, because Kem Sheshachta, they did shechta their own Korban Pesach, even though there's no verbal protest, but the fact that they shechted their own Korban Pesach, that's a demonstration of protest. There's no greater protest than that, the fact that they shechted their own Korban Pesach. So therefore we say as follows. We say that if it's Eved and Bonim that are Ketanim, if they're children which are Ketanim, or if it's an Eved Knani, over there they don't have independence. So therefore, no matter what, even if they do protest, then we say that they're part of the master's Chabura, because they don't have that independence. Now we say by a Isha, we say, and a Isha, and adult children, and Eved Ivri, we say that you need their consent. And therefore, if they protest, they're not included in the Chabura. But we say min hastam, in the normal course of events, they're part of the household, so they would be included. So you don't need their active consent. Other people, you need their active consent. So even if they don't protest, unless they give their consent, they're not included. If you have a slave of two partners, so the slave can't eat the Korban Pesach of either one of them. He can't eat the Pesach of either one of them. We learn in the Brisa, the Brisa says that he can choose. He can choose which one he wants. He can eat from either one of them. Omar Lei, he answered, Rav Nachman answered, Eina Sava, Eina, the Sava, the elder, V'amrla, Pasya Uchma, or a black vessel. Meaning, Talmid Chacham are sometimes called black vessel because since they learn in such hasmada, they're constantly learning, so they have an appearance of a blackened appearance because they're learning constantly and they're not that particular about or not able to be able to have the white bright clothing, or some say it's a lotion of anivos, but it's referring to a Talmud Chacham. So he said, Minach, this time Shemaisei said, between me and you, we'll come to the right conclusion. Masnisen b'dekapte adari. Our mission is referring to a case where the partners are not on good terms with each other, and they don't want to get benefit from one from the other. They have a animosity one to the other, and they refuse to get any benefit one from the other. So therefore, each one will not allow his eved to partake, or his portion of the eved to partake from the Korban Pesach that he belongs to the other partner, because he does not want to get any benefit from the other partner. And if the eved is allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach, then his portion, his chelik of the eved is getting hano from it. So therefore, that's why we say you can't eat from each one. He can't eat from any one of them, from either one of the korbanos. But the rice is like haptei adani. But the rice is talking in a case where they're not makbid on each other, and therefore the eved can choose. Someone who is half free and half an eved, he cannot eat from the Korban Pesach of his master. So, for instance, if you have an eved that belongs to two partners, one of the shutfim freed his portion, the eved is now half free and half an eved, but he can't eat from his master's Korban Pesach, because presumably the master, the Odin, did not shecht on behalf of this person who is now a stranger, is a free man. So the Gemara's Medayik Mishal Rabba, who the lo yochel, he cannot eat from his master's. Aval Mishal Atzma yochel, but he could eat from his own portion. He could eat, if he wants, he can bring his own Korban Pesach. Vatanya, we learned the Brisa lo yochel, loy mishaloi, veloy mishal Rabba, he can't eat from either of them. More answers like Kasha, Kan Mishnah Rishayna, Kan Mishnah Achrayna. There's a difference between the Mishnah Rishayna and Mishnah Achrayna, the first Mishnah and the second Mishnah. What is that? This one we learned in the Mishnah, Mishnah Chetziv Eved, Chetziv Ben Chayrin, someone who's half free and half of a slave. And we say that Oived es Rabbi, Yoimechad, Resasim, Yoimechad. He's half free, he's half a slave, he therefore works for his master one day, and the next day he works for himself. Diver Beis Hillel. So Beis Hillel said, initially, Mishnah Rishayna, Beis Hillel said, you leave him in that situation. He's half free and half an eved. Beis Shammai says, no. By leaving him in the status quo, Tikantam as Rabbi, you resolve the issue, the dilemma for the master. Well, he works one day for the master, one day for himself. But you haven't resolved his own situation. Why is that? Because he can't get married. Lisa Shifcha, he can't marry a Shifcha, Ben Chorin, because half of him is free, and a free man, a Ben Chorin, can't marry a Shifcha. So therefore, Lisa Bas Chorin Eni Yochol, to marry Bas Chorin Eni Yochol, Shadain Chet, and he can't marry Bas Chorin because part of him is still an Eved, and an Eved cannot marry Bas Chorin. Yibatel, not to get married at all. The world was created to populate the world. It was created to populate the world, so therefore you can't leave it in the status quo where you can't get married. We say for the betterment of the world, we force the master, and we force him to free him. And he therefore he's freed. The now free man, the one who was an Eved and now free man, he owes that money to his master. He doesn't have money because he's been a slave, but he writes a document showing that he's mishabed himself, that he is now obligated to pay that amount of money, the value of the half of his value on the market, that is owed to the master. And therefore we say that we can force the master to free him. And Beis Hillel, the Mishnah Achrona, they reversed their position, and they agreed to Beis Shammai. And therefore we say, according to the Mishnah Achrona, we can force the master to free him. Therefore we treat it as he's freed, and therefore he has the ability to bring his own Korban Pesach, because we can force the master to free him. So that's the difference between the Mishnah and the Brisa, if we hold like the Mishnah Achrona, the Mishnah Rishona, or the Mishnah Achrona.